I remember the early days when my feet treaded the gleaming corridors of a prestigious school, and my heart beat in unison with dreams that seemed so dear and accessible. Each morning began with the promise of knowledge, success, and a future shining brightly on perfectly polished floors and in the glow of clean blackboards. I entered the classroom with the hope that I could absorb all the wisdom of the world, that every book would be a guiding star and every student a friend on the long road of life. But already in the first moments when I found myself in the midst of these shining ideals, something elusive was born inside, which was later to become a destructive storm. The light streaming through the huge windows seemed at first kind, enveloping, but gradually a strange foreboding came over me. The world was too beautiful to be true, and behind this shining shell lurked a shadow that was hard to understand. I noticed glances flickering around every corner in the corridors, in which there was no warmth, only cold distrust. The quiet whispered conversations, flickering around the sides, seemed like condemnation, imprinted in invisible marks on the faces of those who were supposed to be my peers. I could feel the invisible barriers, laid down by years of prejudice, begin to separate me from this community, as if I were showing up with a mark that no one wanted to see. I remember sitting at my desk, listening to a lesson, and suddenly feeling every smile from the teacher, every approving look from a classmate turn cold and detached. In the moments of silence between words, I would catch a silent call within me, a painful, almost inexpressible feeling, as if someone invisible were constantly measuring my worth and leaving marks where they shouldn't be. My hands, trembling with excitement, tried to record every detail. The sound of the door closing, the flickering glow of the lamp overhead, the rustle of pages that seemed to echo my inner voice, telling me that I was different. The days passed, but my insecurities grew stronger and stronger, and each new lesson became a challenge. I stared at the white walls as if they held secrets that could destroy my sense of self. Newspapers, posters, perfectly arranged trophies of success, all reminded me that I was in the wrong place where I belonged. I truly believed that knowledge and talent could get me through these invisible barriers. But every day I realized that around every corner there was a new sign of alienation, another unspoken grievance that could wound so deeply that pain became a constant companion. I remember one day, sitting at my desk, listening to a lecture, I felt as if time stood still for a moment. In an auditorium full of the sounds of laughter and lively chatter, I felt a loneliness so acute that it literally drilled into my soul. My thoughts wavered between hope for a better future and the fear-soaked thought, why me? There was no pity for myself or the world in that question, but a cold cry of the soul that I could neither swallow nor contain. Each step through the luxurious corridors turned into a slow fall, as if an invisible hand was pulling me downward, toward a place where there was no comfort or understanding. Every echo of footsteps, every glint of passing eyes echoed in my memory, making it heavier, as if every moment spent here left an indelible mark on my heart. Those first days were a lesson to me, a lesson that the ideals presented from an early age can turn out to be a ruthless illusion, and that the true face of the world is sometimes hidden behind a mask of perfect beauty and order. I felt a struggle slowly building up inside my soul, a struggle I had never known before, a struggle between all that I had been taught and the cold, impartial reality that was entering me imperceptibly but inevitably. Every morning when I awakened, I tried to pull together all my dreams and ambitions, but they were shrouded in the shadows of misunderstanding and contempt. I saw how every bright ray of sunlight through the tall windows exposed the cracks in my heart, as if nature itself wanted to tell me, you are different. Perhaps the most painful thing was the realization that my efforts to be accepted, my efforts to follow high ideals had only led to silent condemnation, leaving behind an emptiness and a sense of hopelessness. At that moment, I realized that despite all the power of knowledge, despite my dreams and aspirations, the world could remain indifferent to my existence, capable of judging and rejecting only on the basis of appearances. These encounters with cruel reality, when every smile turned into a cold stare, every praise into a fleeting approval, and every compliment into a flickering premonition of judgment, changed my perception of myself forever. I remember how on one of the first days, sitting in the corner of a crowded classroom, I felt as if the world around me had ceased to exist. Only an endless stream of subjective evaluations and unspoken reproaches penetrated my soul, leaving scars that were so deep that each new lesson was a reminder of my otherness. I heard unknowable whispers, like the wind in the desert, rushing through the corridors as if their purpose was to destroy the hope in even the brightest corner of my heart. And so, after going through this first agony, I realized that my life could no longer be a simple series of lessons and achievements. It turned into an endless battle, where every day became a test, and every second, a decisive moment in the struggle for the right to be myself. All the details of the first encounter with this cruel reality, all the sounds, smells, and images merged into a single stream that was impossible to resist. This pain, sharp and piercing, became the starting point of my life, the basis on which later grew the desire to fight for justice and to prove that no external labels can determine the true value of a person. I remember how in that cold period, when every minute seemed like an eternity, I quietly swore to myself that one day I would stop being a puppet of alien prejudices. In every glance, in every chime of footsteps, in every shadow around every corner, I saw not just a reflection of my fears, but the beginnings of an unconquerable determination. Even though my first experiences were full of unwanted pain, they became the foundation for my path, a path I had yet to travel, to honor the power of the spirit and change a world where injustice had a right to exist. If I was able to feel that sadness, that deep wound from the first days, it made me realize there is nothing eternal about a system that rejects soul. That fire of pain, though it started quietly, slowly grew into a flame that could illuminate even the darkest recesses of my existence. I began to see a low but indestructible voice within me that whispered, "You are worthy of more. You are worthy of the truth." And those first, subtle signs of realization became the beacon around which I began to build my entire life. So began my journey, a journey full of hard questions, pain, and inevitable answers that had to be accepted. Those were the days interiors turned into an internal struggle, where my heart tried to hold on to dreams, dissolving into a cold stream of biased evaluations. I learned to recognize the true face of the world, where the glitter of beauty hides the bitter truth, where ideals become instruments of condemnation, and every uninvited glance becomes a mark that defines your place in this cruel mechanism. Step by step, I felt the invisible hand in hand with my youthful naivete, weaving a canvas of inevitable fate in which I was imprinted as another, as one who was not destined to experience the simple joy of being. But it was in this painful realization that a spark was born, a spark that inspired me not to give up, but to fight, to seek answers to the questions that plagued me every night. The world where ideals shine was full of shadows, and I realized that if I couldn't change this world, I had to be the first to change. Every tiny detail of my early days, the cold of the corridors, the flickering light of the lamps, the quiet rustle of footsteps and unseen glances crammed into my memory, creating a book of experience that I had to read to the last page. These memories, woven into the very fabric of my former self, became an integral part of my essence, the foundation on which I would build my future, filled with the struggle for truth and justice. Although those days were full of unspoken pain, they were the beginning without which it was impossible to imagine the road to change. I hold every word, every tiny memory of the first time. I felt like an outsider in a world where everyone seemed to be one. Those were the days when my soul, not yet knowing the price of real pain, was gradually painted in the formidable light of prejudice. And it was then that the realization dawned that true strength is born from the deepest wounds, that every drop of tears can be the seed of a revolution of the soul. This uneasy chronicle of my early days became the flame that, slowly flaring up, layered all shades of pain, despair, but also fragile hope for a better future. Now, looking back on those moments, I realized that they were not just a test, but the beginning of a great struggle. A struggle for my identity, for the right to be heard, for the opportunity to transform pain into strength. Those first shadows of racism, so vividly cut off against the glittering interiors, were a signal to me. The world has the right to be cruel, but within each person lies a seed of truth that can only germinate when you dare to face it head on. So began my story. Not just a story of humiliation, but a story of awakening that gained momentum with each passing moment, leaving an indelible mark on my soul and instilling a determination that would later become my voice against the system. Those first days became my personal chronicle of resilience, the foundation for all the battles that followed, where every pain and every suffering hardened me, making me believe that even the deepest wounds can give birth to a new strength, a new hope that can change the world. I remember that day, when the familiar silence of the familiar corridor was suddenly interrupted by sounds that could awaken the darkest fears. I was walking down the same narrow passage where the dim light had flickered before, and everything seemed normal, but suddenly everything changed. In an instant, the space around me was filled with an ominous energy, and I felt time slow down, as if the universe itself had decided to let me memorize every excruciating detail of what had happened. As my footsteps echoed across the wet, shiny floor, I heard the first sharp sound, a voice penetrating the silence, filled with contempt and implacable hatred. That voice, like an icy blow, went through my ears, making my heart beat faster. The lantern lights, flickering with erratic frequency, cast indistinct, ominous silhouettes on the corridor walls. Every image reflected in the puddles. Every flicker of light seemed like signs of an impending storm I couldn't stop. I saw the entire world narrowed down to a single moment, to my face, captured in the reflection of the cold light, where the first tears erupted in my eyes. Those tears weren't just a reaction to pain. They were a cry of the soul, a reflection of the realization that everything that had once seemed unchanging and safe was now falling apart in front of me. The sharp shadows flickering in the corners of the corridor merged with the murmur of distant voices into a single eerie chorus that seemed to demand that I realize the cruelty of the world. I remember how, standing in that corridor, I felt like every second was turning into an eternity. At first it seemed like I was just hearing sounds, rustles, barely audible screams, but then those sounds turned into a real ice storm encompassing my entire being. Every word, even if it wasn't spoken aloud, resonated in my mind, leaving behind unhealed wounds. My eyes, meeting the reflection of fear and pain, almost lost all ability to see light, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar darkness. In the ominous flicker of the lamps, in the darkness of the corridor, I saw images that seemed ripped from nightmares. The faces hidden by the shadows, their screams, all blended into one unbearable symphony. I felt the invisible hands of prejudice squeezing my heart, leaving a space in it occupied only by fear and loneliness. Every sound, every shadow, every burst of light on the damp surface was proof to me that the world was unfair and ruthless. A fateful act of cruelty unfolded before my eyes and left a mark that will never fade. In that moment, I realized that, despite my thirst for knowledge and my desire to be accepted, I had become a target whose vulnerability and otherness served as an excuse for inhuman cruelty. The deafening sounds came upon me like a barrage, shattering the illusion of order, and I felt all my former confidence dissolve in a sea of hostility. My eyes flashed with images of my classmates, whose faces radiated cold detachment, and I saw their gazes filled with sarcastic hatred piercing through me. Every sound seemed to become a blow that not only shattered my dreams, but left scars deeper with each passing moment. I heard a voice full of contempt echoing down the hallway, turning an ordinary space into an arena where a drama that could change my entire life was unfolding. The merciless reality burst into my world with unstoppable force, and I felt my inner supports crumble under the onslaught of this act of cruelty. In that moment, every sound, every glimmer of light, every echo of a voice was forever etched in my memory, as evidence that justice does not exist where unwavering cruelty reigns. The unspeakable pain that had lodged in my heart took hold where the rhythm of hope had been beating before. In that instant, the corridor, once filled with quiet life, became a symbol of hopelessness. I, standing in the darkened space, felt every particle of my being shrinking in agony, trying to comprehend all the horrors that had arisen in my path. It was a moment when every sound, every raindrop that fell on the cold floors, became the embodiment of the blows of fate that would change me forever. And I realized that I could no longer remain indifferent to what was happening around me. The world in which I lived had revealed its true, ruthless essence. From that day on, my perception of the world changed forever. I felt every word spoken with cruel intent, as if dropped from around a corner, cut me up inside. The corridor where I had been pacing with others was now for me a place where not only physical but also spiritual pain was embodied. This fateful incident was the starting point of my life, the moment when the world lost its former illusion, and I, for I was the victim of this act, realized that the future no longer promised me protection. It was the line from which all the days that followed were filled with the heavy realization that it is injustice that is the deepest wound of all, leaving permanent marks on the soul. And so, standing in that silent corridor, I felt for the first time that every tiny detail, every second of that terrible moment would tell a story about me, about my pain, about my formation. That moment is forever inscribed in my life as a sign, a signal, that the world as the official rhetoric portrays it holds ruthless realities capable of destroying everything I have ever held true and valuable. And despite how excruciatingly difficult it was to accept this truth, it became the nucleus around which my determination to fight for justice, to change a system that allowed such acts to happen over and over again, was subsequently spun. Every teardrop, every unspeakable feeling of disgust and fear carried through that fateful moment became a loud echo of future battles. They became my personal fuel for the fight, a force that would awaken in me a resolve that would not allow me to forget the horror I had endured. That day, fixed in time and space, was the turning point when the innocence of a young heart disappeared forever, and the fire that could light the entire path to change this world was born. Thus, this fateful incident, saturated with every sound and every shadow, became not just the tragic fate of one boy, but a symbol of how cruelty can enslave the soul if not confronted. My gaze, filled with fear and despair, was forever imprinted in that moment when I realized no more little things would go unheeded. No more cries would be extinguished. That moment was my first step on a path where every pain, every wound becomes fuel to fight for my own dignity, and for a future in which there is no place for such cruelty. I remember how, after minutes that turned into an eternity, I stood alone, experiencing a brief but all-consuming bout of frustration. That moment, pierced with anguish and echoing contempt, became the basis for a further transformation of my consciousness, when every sound, every movement around me transported me to a world where injustice remained inevitable, but also encouraged me to seek the strength to resist. It was then that I swore to myself that I would never accept this world as it was, that every second of pain I lived would be the starting point for my rebellion against the system that treated my soul so ruthlessly. These agonizing moments, inscribed in the eternity of my consciousness, became an integral part of my life's journey, forever changing me and making me realize every wound, every disappointment is a challenge from which there is no escape. That event, with its senseless horror and inner emptiness, forever cast a shadow over my soul, forcing me to fundamentally rethink everything I thought was normal. And now, looking back, I realized that it was through all this painful drama that I gained the strength that later became the engine of my protest, against a system that could enslave even the purest of souls. I remember how, after that fateful day, the world around me fell into a harsh and merciless darkness. Days turned into endless hours, when loneliness seeped into every corner of my soul like cold water, mercilessly eroding all remnants of previous hope. I found myself alone with my thoughts, in silent and wet corridors, where every sound of rain reminded me that I was now alone against the whole world. I was surrounded by absolute silence, broken only by the rhythmic clatter of drops. And this silence was so jarring that in every echo of it sprouted images of those agonizing moments when my dreams were shattered by the wall of indifference. Sitting on an old, shriveled bench under the dim light of lonely street lamps, I was in acute pain. The wet asphalt, cold as ice under my feet, seemed a reflection of my condition. Every raindrop falling from the sky was like a cold reminder that the world was rejecting me. I could feel the rain taking the last vestiges of confidence with it, and my thoughts turning into an endless series of agonizing questions. Why me? Why can't my pain be heard? In those long moments of solitude, my thoughts wavered between deafening grief and fear of a future as bleak and uncertain as this rainy twilight. An incomprehensible struggle broke out inside me. Part of me wanted to forget everything, to dissolve into the bottomless darkness, while the other, the quiet spark, stubbornly resisted, trying to break through the cold and fatigue. I felt every second of loneliness enveloping me, leaving behind only the bitter taste of loss. The images of those who had once been close to me now seemed like ghosts that I could neither see nor hear. They dissolved, leaving me alone with a silent pain that grew more acute with each passing day. As I sat in this desolate place, under the flickering light of the city lights, I watched the reflections in the puddles convey the fullness of my loss. It was as if everything around me was shrouded in a cold haze, and my gaze was directed blankly downward to avoid meeting the gaze of my own inner demons. I tried to find a spark of solace in this darkness, but every thought, every moment only deepened the feeling of loneliness and hopelessness. The creeping time, as if it were slowly spreading out, brought more and more questions and the same answers from which it was impossible to hide. Answers that confirmed that the world was cruel and indifferent to my torment. Memories of that day when injustice erupted on me haunted me everywhere. Even in my quietest moments when I tried to gather my thoughts, echoes of that moment crept into my mind like unwanted visions. I could hear the echo of my own breathing merging with the sound of the rain, reminding me that I no longer belonged to this world of those who once seemed close to me. Every day the pain became more unbearable, as if it had a life of its own, penetrating every corner of my soul and leaving no room for oblivion. Often I was tired of sitting alone and began to recall conversations, the smallest details of past moments, as if trying to find a single ray of light that could warm my frozen heart. But all I found was an endless repetition of questions. Why me? Why does this world so relentlessly reject me? These questions tore at me from the inside, out like sharp knives, and left unhealed wounds that time never seemed to be able to heal. I felt my soul screaming in silence, as if the whole world had turned away, leaving me alone amidst the shadows of the past and the pain. In those long nights, when cold and darkness combined, I sought solace in memories of past dreams, of what I dreamed of becoming, of the bright picture of the future that my parents and teachers had instilled in me. But it all seemed like an illusion, broken by the cruel blows of reality. Every thought was permeated with pain, every old hope dissolved, leaving only emptiness and a bitter sense of loss. I tried not to hear the cold echo of my own doubts, but it penetrated every corner of my mind, making me feel the bitterness of loneliness that had no end. In those moments, I met myself with a gaze full of fatigue and hopelessness that was reflected in every flickering glimmer of rain. I watched the boundaries between past and present blur as my thoughts strove to regain lost moments, to feel for a moment like the person I once was. In this state of inner turmoil, I tried to pick up the shattered fragments of hope, like a person picking up the pieces of a broken mirror to see his reflection again. But every such effort turned into a new wave of deep sadness. I was learning to hear the voice of my heart, filled with tears and silent cries, and that voice was telling me that there was no more moment before my heart began to die in pain. The pervasive memories of past hurts grew heavier by the day, pulling me deeper and deeper into the abyss of loneliness, where once quiet dreams resounded. Now only the blue note of hopelessness triumphed, staring into eyes that had long ago stopped believing in goodness. I spent hours sitting alone, listening to the sounds of the night, where every rustle, every random sound seemed to be the cries of 1,000 minds left without solace. These sounds became a reminder that I was trapped in my own world of pain, where there was no support or understanding. In that moment, I realized that the trauma of that fateful day had become a permanent part of me, an integral part of my identity that I was forced to carry every day, like a cross set by fate. So the days went by, immersed in darkness and observation of my own thoughts, where every moment turned into an endless struggle between the desire to forget everything and the inexpressible need to find answers to agonizing questions. The world around me seemed faceless and cold, and every minute I felt a silent but bright spark inside me, a desire to escape from the pain, even if it seemed invincible. There were moments when I allowed myself only a brief sigh, hoping that even in my deepest loneliness, light would someday break through the darkness. In this stream of time, my thoughts carried me to a place where I could once again feel that life matters, that in every hard blow of fate lies an opportunity for change. But while my eyes still glistened with tears, and my heart beat in time with the incessant rain, I only quietly realized that pain so deep and all-consuming had to be overcome at the cost of a long, agonizing struggle. This struggle became my daily test, where I sincerely tried to come to terms with my own wounded self and find the spark that could ignite hope for a better future. Thus continued my inner battle, a battle where every moment felt like an eternity, where loneliness and pain became constant companions from which I could not escape for a moment. I struggled with my own fears, trying to free my soul a little from the unspeakable weight of betrayal, which forever left a trace in my heart. And in these endless reflections, filled with silence and echoes of the past, I began to realize that only by accepting my pain and facing it can I find the path to healing. This struggle, so fierce and relentless, became the foundation of my inner world, changing me forever and transforming me into a force that could lift me up again, even when the past seemed insurmountable. The inner struggle became not just a part of life for me, but an integral reality in which every morning began with the question, how do I get through this new day when the past is relentless? And the answers came slowly, through long hours of solitude, when even the sounds of the night reminded me that I had to fight for my soul. My story of pain, my reflections and my tears became mentors who, like a cold mirror, reflected all my fears and hopes. So, in those silent and sad hours, I began to realize that a person's real strength lies not in the absence of pain, but in the ability to outgrow it, turning each wound into a source of wisdom and determination. I continue on this path, even when the echoes of yesterday's suffering still echo in my heart, and every morning I look for a way to prove to myself that even in the darkest times, there is room for a glimmer of light. My inner struggle has become my teacher, who shows me daily that pain can be turned into strength if you don't give up and keep searching for answers to the most painful questions. This path is not easy, and I know that there are still many challenges ahead. But I have already realized that only by going through the abyss of loneliness can I find the strength that can change not only my destiny, but the destiny of everyone who once felt rejected. So, sitting alone under the flickering light of a rainy night, I look into the darkness and realize that even if the world around me falls into darkness, there is an unquenchable spark within me that can give birth to a new life. This is my long and difficult path to healing, to rebirth, to victory over the cruelest part of fate. And as long as this quiet but constant call for change resounds in my soul, I know that every step, every moment of loneliness I experience makes me stronger and helps me find that dear hope that will one day light my way forever. I remember the moment when, as if after a dark night, a spark awoke in my heart that could dispel the darkness of cruelty and prejudice for the first time. Meeting the faces with whom I had once shared innocent dreams was now a new test, a test of a collective spirit united in the pursuit of justice. Standing under the golden light, I realized that even after the deepest wounds, there is a moment in time when pain turns into strength and loneliness gives way to the united voices of those who believe that change is possible. At this pivotal moment, as the cold walls of old attitudes began to crumble, I saw people who had once surrounded me with indifference now become a unified force. We were coming together to, like sparks, ignite the flame of change. In the streets of the city, knowing the price of our pain, we came out and rose above prejudice and inhumanity, proving that even the most broken souls can stand up to claim their right to life, dignity, and justice. I remember how, beneath the vaults of the halls where fear used to reign in silence, our voices merged into one powerful echo, an echo that could break down the walls of injustice erected over centuries. These people who once felt left out, as if cast aside by the system, now stood shoulder to shoulder and faced the future with a determination that was stronger than any suffering. Every handshake, every word of protest, every quiet promise of change resonated in my heart as an old reminder that freedom is born, where people are not willing to accept oppression. In those hours of change, I saw crowds begin to gather in busy squares, where colorful placards mingled with earnest looks and cries of "for justice" resounded to the point of pain. In the streets, where before there had been the dreariness of hopelessness, the rhythmic steps of the solidarity masses now resounded, their voices transformed into a mighty force capable of changing destinies. I heard in every word, in every sound of footsteps, the pulse of a new era breaking, through the veil of suffering and the darkness of delusion. This moment, when the heavy burden of loneliness and pain gave way to the fire of collective protest, became for me a symbol of rebirth. I saw the eyes of my friends, my fellow travelers, reflect a determination that was brighter than any star of parting with the past. Together we began to pave the way to a new world where everyone's voice, no matter how quiet, gained power and significance. These people, teachers, students, parents, city dwellers, became not just witnesses to their pain, but architects of a new reality, where the right to equality and dignity becomes the legislator of a new order. Through the noise of the protests, through the succession of rallies and peaceful demonstrations, I felt confidence growing inside me like a young tree breaking through the asphalt. Every protest, every rally speech, every drop of sweat and tears shed in the name of justice became bricks in the foundation of a future, where hate gave way to love and fear to freedom. I saw how the city streets transformed people, previously silent and lonely, into a whole, where echoes of pain were replaced by shouts of approval, where each cry became a manifesto of a new beginning. It was a time when the streets were transformed into scenes of a great drama, where every little thing, from the flickering light of street lamps to the quiet sound of the city's bustle, was a reminder that change was inevitable. We standing in the crowd felt our every glance, every handshake raised and every slogan uttered, carried the power to awaken sleeping hearts. Reflections of our hopes and dreams, like light in a dark labyrinth, began to transform old painful images in our minds, replacing them with new symbols, symbols of unity, love, and courage. I remember looking at the faces of those who clasped hands in support. I felt for the first time that together, we could break down the walls, erected by years of injustice. Every word spoken at the meetings, every song played to the sound of footsteps and marching, became part of a huge chorus that declared, "We will no longer live in the shadow of suffering. We will stand up and change this world." These voices, merging into a single symphony of protest, made it clear that each of us, despite our pain, has the right to light, to a new era of trust and mutual respect, to the rustling sounds of the city's awakening. As dawn slowly overcame the darkness of the night, I watched a gentle flame of hope ignite in people's hearts, gradually growing into a blazing torch. This fire, born from our tears and hardships, illuminated even the darkest corners of our souls, giving us confidence that each of us is capable of becoming a source of light for others. We were moving forward, each step filled with a relentless belief that, united, we could rewrite the future, break down the barriers that had held us captive to hatred for centuries. In those moments, I felt the inner pain that once seemed unbearable gradually transform into a strength growing from the deepest layers of my being. This strength became a beacon that pointed the way to a future where the right to justice was unquestioned, and every story, every experience, every drop of tears shed became a symbol of struggle and transformation. Together, we fought to ensure that not only our lives, but the lives of our children, our compatriots, would be free from the chains of a system that had fed on our pain for centuries. I saw how the streets, once filled with indifference, were now littered with the faces of people who were not afraid to speak the truth, who strove for change, where the word of freedom was not an empty sound, but a loud declaration of the right to life, to dignity. In this unity, I found solace. Solace that was proof to me that even after the worst night can dawn, and even a broken soul can be rebuilt. Now, every time I look back and see the path I have traveled, I realize that the struggle for truth and justice is not just a personal challenge, but a collective feat of millions. Our efforts, our unity, and our determination have become the foundation for a future where no one will judge a person by their appearance anymore, where every soul will have a chance to blossom. This path to healing and activism, paved through pain and disappointment, has become our inherent proof that change is possible if we are willing to fight for it until our last breath. Thus, as dawn broke the darkness of the night, I felt that behind every step and every word spoken by our voices was the power to change the world. We, united, had become more than just survivors of pain. We had become a force that could sweep away the traces of discrimination and prejudice, awakening a new generation where justice and love would be the core values. And so, standing on the threshold of a renewed world, I feel every word of protest, every handshake, every look of determination become the bricks from which we build our future. Even though our struggle has been long and hard, it has brought new life, new hope, and the certainty that love and unity can conquer even the deepest wounds. These minutes, filled with the voices of millions and the echo of a common strength, will forever remain in my memory as the beginning of a great era of change. An era where justice triumphs over the system and the soul of every human being, emboldened by faith and courage, shines brighter than any darkness.